Good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming. A bit about myself. 38 years in Canadian Armed Forces, full-time, part-time, 3 tours overseas. I joined in 1975, so right at the very end of the Vietnam War. Overseas, 77, 78, 1980, attached to the British Airborne Battery, and a variety of other things. I was not in Yugoslavia during the war. However, I was in Canada helping to train many people that I know, also familiar with some of the people that have passed away. So a little bit out of contrast there, the position of the Bosnia-Herzegovina area, former Yugoslavia in Europe, north at the top there, and with a population of about 23.5 million people. Interesting note, during the war, early stages, 3 million people left the country as refugees. So the communist years were from 1945 to 1980, and the former Yugoslavia was a socialist state created after the German occupation in World War II, and also a bitter civil war. Initially, there were only 2 recognized ethnic groups in Bosnia, the Bosnian Croats, and Bosnian Serbs. In 1968, Bosnian Muslims were also declared a distinct nation. In 1974, a new constitution was adopted, which led to increased decentralization of government powers, and through a federation of 6 republics, it brought together Serbs, Croats, Bosnian Muslims, Albanians, Slovenes, and others under a comparatively relaxed communist regime. And tensions between these groups were successfully suppressed under the leadership of President Tito. His real name was Josip Broz. And he was in power in 1945 as prime minister, and then 1953 as the first president, until his death in 1980. 1981, clashes in Kosovo between Serb administration and the Albanian majority, calling for Kosovo to be a 7th republic. So Serbian police and Yugoslav nationals suppressed violent demonstrations, leaving Kosovo under martial law for most of the 1980s. February 1984, the city of Sarajevo successfully hosted the Winter Olympics, an international symbol of peace and tolerance. 1986, Slobodan Milosevic, which is a former gas company manager and banker, became the head of Serbia's Central Committee. 1987, in Kosovo, he told the disgruntled Serbs, "No one should dare to beat you." 2 years later, 1989, on the 600th anniversary of the Serbs' defeat at the hands of the Turks, again in Kosovo, he gave a speech to 1 million people about Serb unity. He said, 6 centuries later, we are again in battles and facing battles. He said, they are not armed, although such battles cannot be excluded yet. Then in the 1990s, a series of wars started. 1991, the war broke out and tensions reemerged. There were calls for autonomy within Yugoslavia by nationalist groups led in 1991 to declarations of independence in Croatia and Slovenia. The Serb-dominated Yugoslav army lashed out, first in Slovenia, then in Croatia. Thousands were killed in the latter conflict, which was paused in 1992 under a UN-monitored ceasefire. 1991 continues. More conflict in Bosnia, with a complex mix of Serbs, Muslims, Croats, was next to try for independence. The Bosnian Serbs, backed by Serbs everywhere in Yugoslavia, resisted. Under their leader, Radovan Karadzic, they threatened bloodshed if Bosnia's Muslims and Croats, who outnumbered the Serbs, broke away. So despite European blessing for the move in the 1992 referendum, war came fast. Sarajevo was under siege from May 1992 and lasted for 44 months. Journalists uncovered concentration camps in the 70% of Bosnia controlled by Serb forces. July 1992, the territories of the Republic of Bosnia and Herzegovina and the Republic of Croatia controlled by Serb forces after Operation Corridor. Then in September 1993, the Battle of Medak Pocket. This was significant for Canadians as there was an area between the Serbs and the Croats in the north end of the map there, and 2 PPCLI was right in the middle of it. 800 Canadians. They were pounded for 15 hours by mortars, artillery, 20-millimeter rounds, and barely fired back. Their white APCs were a huge target. Luckily, no fatalities. April 1994, the NATO offensive begins, forcing Bosnian Serbs to keep their end of the bargain. Airstrikes were against the army of the Serb Republic of BiH, commonly known as VRS. And you can just barely see there's black fighter jets symbolically coming in from the west into VHS areas. But the Serbs took peacekeepers hostage. In May 1995, Croatian forces launched attacks. In August, the Croatian army stormed areas in Croatia under Serb control, prompting thousands to flee. Soon, Croatia and Bosnia were fully independent. Slovenia and Macedonia had already gone. Montenegro left later. The war mostly ended in 1995 after NATO bombed the Bosnian Serbs and Muslim and Croat armies made gains on the ground. An interesting note is we had Canadian bombers in there as well, assisting with the bombing action with the F-18s. Also in 1994, the Implementation Force, better known as I-4, was a NATO-led multinational peace enforcement force in Bosnia, Herzegovina, under a one-year mandate from 20th of December 1995 to 20th December 1996, under the code name Operation Joint Endeavor. NATO was tasked by United Nations to carry out the provisions of the Dayton Peace Accords, ending the Bosnian War. The Dayton Peace Accords were started on 22nd of November 1995 by the presidents of Bosnia, Croatia, Serbia, on behalf of Serbia and the Bosnian Serb Republic. And the peace accords contained a general framework agreement and 11 supporting annexes with maps. The accords had 3 major goals: the ending of hostilities, authorization of military and civilian program going into effect, and the establishment of a central Bosnian government while excluding individuals who are serving sentences under the indictment of international war crimes. Slide. It was an imperfect peace. International peace efforts to stop the war failed, and the UN was humiliated, and over 100,000 civilians died. The Dayton Peace Accords divided Bosnia into 2 self-governing entities, again, the Bosnian Serb Republic and a Muslim Croat Federation, lightly bound by a central government. 1998, there was ethnic cleansing, whereby Yugoslav army units withdrawn from Croatia and renamed the Bosnian Serb Army carved out a huge swath of Serb-dominated territory. Over 1 million Bosnian Muslims and Croats were driven from their homes in ethnic cleansing. The Serbs also suffered. The capital, Sarajevo, was besieged and shelled, and UN peacekeepers brought in to quell the fighting were seen as ineffective. In 1999, Kosovo's ethnic Albanians fought Serbs in another brutal war to gain independence. Serbia ended the conflict beaten, battered, and alone. So within the UN and NATO over the years, 500,000 troops were involved in total, 42 countries involved. At any one time, the peak manning was 60,000 troops. Normally, it was a 6-month tour of duty, and many people, including Canadians, had many repeat tours. Some 2, 3, 4, 5 tours over there. For the Canadian Armed Forces, we're in action from 1991, and we still have people there today. Over 19 years, 40,000 Canadian peacekeepers were in the area. Today, there are 5 in Kosovo on Operation Cobalt, and they're on a 6-month rotation. Over all the years, you'll see in the history books it says 23 Canadians gave their lives. It's actually 24. And I did a bit of research on the people, and today I'd like to honor these peacekeepers who served and sacrificed their lives during the war in the Balkans. And I just ask you to bow your heads as I read their names in the order of their passing from 1992 to 2004. Michael Ralph, John Ternopolsky, David Gunther, Jean-Marie Berchard, Dennis Garreau, James DeCoste, Stéphane Langevin, David Galvin, Kirk Cooper, Mark Isfeld, Joseph Rousseau, Christopher Holopina, Robert Violette, Terry McRae, James Ogilvie, Gilles Desmarais, Jerry Squires, Vincent Joubert, Tom Pollard, Gerald Bailey, John Peace, Jamie Vermeulen, Stéphane Morissette, and David Johnson. We will remember them. Thank you.